Moving on, what this get intent does is it gets the intent that we used to start this activity. Talk about that in a minute. We have the action, and then the action is what I was just talking about prior to that. It could be action edit or action insert, or you can create your own custom actions. Finally, here we have some content values, which are location values. This means we're going to be probably putting them in a database sometime. And this is all the location code here, but I'll get to that in the geolocation course. Moving up here, you can see we have an action edit and an action insert. Now, so you can see how these two are handled differently. If we're editing a note, then we expect for the note to already have values in it. So what we do is, you're starting to get the hang of this, we query the cursor, and then because there's only one, we have to move the cursor to the first object, and there's going to be only one. What we do is, we set the title text to the text of the note that's already in the database. We set the content to the note that's already in the database. What we do here is we set the title of the action bar to the title of the note, which adds some cohesiveness to the application. Now, in action insert, what we have to do now is, what this constructor does is it simply takes the values and location values and then puts them in this new one. What we do is we create a default note and then insert that, and then the action bar, since this column is nothing, we have a string resource called new note, and it simply just produces new note. And what this does is, in insert, this prevents us from having to, later in the activity, have to decide whether this action was inserted or this action was edited. Because in insert, we're creating a new note, we're now technically editing that note that we created. It's really handy. Now what we do to this title text is what this method does, add text change, is we can create a text watcher, and it listens for whenever the text is changed, right before the text is changed, and after the text is changed. You can see that after the text is changed, we set this editable, we set that to the title of the action bar. So as you type, here, if I can demonstrate this for you here, when we create a new note, this is action insert. You can see that new note is given right there. Now when we click on this, the keyboard is brought up. Now look right here, what happens when I start typing. You can see it changes based on what's in here, and it adds some nice cohesiveness. And then there's this dialog that appears. Would I like to save it out? No. Getting back to here, let's try something fun. What we can do here is, along with saying the title of the note, let's add just a simple note thing here. And what this will do is this will what it did before, it'll put that whenever it is changed, it'll reflect the changes in the title, but it'll also add a space and then a note. Let's do that. Let's just do that for fun. See, I'm running the activity here. It is installing. I'll just give it a minute. And it is starting. Alright, now you can see when I add a note and I start typing, you see that there will always be a note prefix. Isn't that neat? Alright, back to this. On create. In most cases, in on create options menu, you're going to inflate a view. On option select, you can see we have when the save button is hit, then we're going to do a save. When discard is hit, we want to delete the note and then finish the activity. Now, with share, what we do is, you can see this has a striking resemblance to the contextual action bar, and that's exactly what it's intended to do. We can just skip over that because I've already talked about it. Now, this piece of code looks especially daunting, but let's go ahead and dissect it. Now, what this android.r.id.home is, if I can demonstrate for you here, that is what happens when a user clicks on this. You can see it brings them back. Well, now let's try and dissect this here. This states that if the title text equals nothing, if there's nothing in the title text, these two ampersands mean and. So if the title text is equal to nothing and the content is not equal to nothing, this is what this exclamation point here, it means not, then we want to run this method, and what it does is it launches a dialog saying that, hey, you can't save a note without a title. What this does is, this first part states that if, what this variable before title is the title that is first, the title that is first saved when we open a note, and so we can use this to check for if it has changed or not. And what this is exactly what it does. If the title before does not equal the current title, or if the title content before does not equal the current content, and is saved is not true, then we want to launch a verify dialog. That means that something has changed, and we want the user to know that by bringing them a dialog. Alright, now what this does is this states that if the title and the content are both nothing, we'll just delete the activity and finish it. Now, if the title is something, and you can see we've had this before right here. And then, if at all else, if any of these, it should follow one of these, but if so, if, let's say, they change the text and they remember to save, then we'll just finish the activity for them. And what this finish activity does is it properly closes the activity by creating a parent intent and then clearing the top. In Android, when you create a new activity, you create a whole new set of tasks. What this does is it clears those tasks in order to save memory, and then it creates a new task. What this does is it starts that activity and then finishes that intent. Now here we have some dialogues here, and I've talked about this in the UI segment. We have some alert dialogues, we set the message, and we have there's three buttons in our alert dialog. There's a positive button, a neutral button, and a negative button. And we just set the neutral button, and then we do the same for the launch verify dialog, except for we actually have we have a positive button and a negative button. Positive button, it saves and finishes the activity. Negative button, it deletes the URI and it finishes the activity. Alright, what this save does is it grabs the current, whatever in the edit text, puts them in the content values, and saves them. It also sets this is save variable to true. What delete does is it does what it says, deletes the note. Alright? Now, this notes map activity I'll be talking about in the geolocation course. And likewise for the select location activity, I'll be talking about that in the geolocation course. We have a final controller activity here. It's called preferences activity. And you can see it just extends regular activity. In the onCreate though, because of the new fragments API, what we do is we get our current fragment manager. Anytime you're putting a fragment up, you must call begin transaction. What this r.id.content is that we're replacing is just basically the screen. On a handset device, we're not worrying about tablets. On a handset device, that's basically everything that's on the screen. We're replacing that, you can see, with a settings fragment, which I'll get to later. And we're committing that change. What we have here, display home as up, is basically, if I can open preferences here, It's that arrow. Now we can change that so it says false, and we'll see the effects that has. Let me just run the activity. Run the application. Yes, we'll run it on the emulator. It'll just take a minute to install. And here we are. Go to Preferences. You can see that arrow's not there. And usually when you're creating, when you have a kind of hierarchical kind of view where everything revolves around one activity, you usually want to set this variable to true. Let's just set that to true again. You usually want that to be true so that the user knows that, hey, I want to get back to this activity, here's how I can do so. And then in order to get back here, we'll have to hit the back button. There we are. And then navigation mode standard is what it says is standard navigation mode. There's no, we can change this so that, let's see what other modes there are. We have a list view mode where the user will be presented with a drop-down list. We also have tabs where you can have tabs, but we want a standard mode. We set the title to this string resource. Now, you can see that this looks just like the finished activity, and that's what we want to do when on back is pressed, and also when home is pressed. Now, in this settings fragment, what we do is, instead of a set content view, this instead has an add preferences from resource, which essentially does the same thing. You can see what we've done here is we've added a listener to the feedback key preference. And let's take a look at what it does. What it does is when this is clicked, it creates an intent with a certain action send. And then we put some extras in it, like we put the extra email is an email. You can see we've set the type to be plain text, and the subject of that email to be feedback. We sorted this activity, but we don't know who's going to run that activity, so we've run intent.createChooser, email intent, and then the title of the dialog. And what happens here in the create chooser is that we don't know if the user uses Gmail, maybe they use a different email client on their phone, and we don't want to have to limit them to just one email client. Maybe they're not going to use this kind of email client. What create chooser does is by the Android system, we don't have to do anything extra. The Android system creates a list of different email clients, and then the user can pick which one they prefer. This course is brought to you in collaboration with Pablo Farias. It is also brought to you by Zenva. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/ZenvaDev, ZenvaDev. You can also follow us on Twitter at ZenvaTweets, ZenvaTweets. We also have great other courses on application and game development.